Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. It is the end of a long day for me, so I'm really glad to see so many cool people in the room with us, and really honored to present this panel. Carla Dupree, who's the executive director of City Lit, I was just like, can I do a trans panel? She's like, yeah, sure, whatever you want, at all. Just bring in cool people. So I just brought in some of my favorites, both here and from around the country. I have a formal intro I'm going to do from City Lit, and then as you heard me talk with the authors, we're each going to read for about 8-9 minutes, and then we'll use the time available at the end for any questions from the audience. Before we begin today's festivities, we want to take a moment to recognize the alarming state of affairs that we currently live in, with executive orders significantly impacting many of us. We are mindful of those with heavy hearts who may be wrestling with a host of uncertainties. We do hope your time with us allows you to be fully present, not that any of the issues will be resolved. More so because this day we gather to celebrate the remarkable stories and the range of illustrious authors you'll have access to, along with the multiple ways you can grow in your craft. This is the day we celebrate reading and writing and pave the way for those stories to give light to our future. We'd like to acknowledge that we are currently on the traditional lands of Piscataway, Lumbee, and Eastern Band of Cherokee community members who have stewarded it through generations. We respectfully ask you to make this a more meaningful practice if you live in the region, and to consider learning more about Indigenous Baltimore. Join us in honoring and acknowledging the original inhabitants of the land that we are on, as well as the enslaved people who built this country and the structures that make up modern North American landscape, by paying respects to the past and present. Please understand, acknowledgement can be shown in simple ways, like learning about invasive and native plants and species and educating yourself on local tribal histories. Hello, my name is Dr. Tony May Mall. I'm a board member of the City Lit Project. Thank you. Love that enthusiasm. Welcome to the end of the 22nd Annual City Lit Festival. The City Lit Project, in partnership with our host, the Lord Baltimore Hotel and Red Emma's, presents this year's festival's themes on the words of the iconic poet Nikki Giovanni. Our stories give light to our future. We honor readers and writers in celebrating and amplifying literature at a time when record numbers of books by BIPOC and LGBTQI community members are banned from library shelves and public schools. Our festival showcases remarkable poets and writers we want you to know about. We're running a little late, so I hope you don't mind, Carla. I'm going to skip forward a little bit, but I do want to point out we have a whole bunch of incredible programming year-round, including our City Lit stage at the Book Festival, City Lit Studio, A Home for the Heart to Live In, which is our poetry series from Cave Canem poets, and our Write Like a Mother annual retreat. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to the authors joining us. I will start with Casey Plett. Casey Plett is the author of On Community, A Dream of a Woman, Little Fish, A Safe Girl to Love, and the co-editor of Meanwhile Elsewhere, Science Fiction and Fantasy from Transgender Writers. Casey, I didn't tell you this, but my book club's actually reading that book right now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I will. I love the opening. It is hot. So you should read this book, y'all. Okay, and the publisher, of course, of LittlePuss Press. She's an assistant professor of English and film at Ohio University. Addie Tsai, who used any on all pronouns, is the author of Dear Twin, included in the American Library Association's Rainbow List in 2021, and Unwieldy Creatures, a Shirley Jackson finalist for Best Novel. Addie is an assistant teaching professor of creative writing at William & Mary, where she is affiliate faculty in gender, sexuality, and women's studies. She's the author of Straight White Men Can't Dance, American Masculinity in Film and Popular Culture, which is forthcoming from Bloomsbury. Nic Anstett is a writer from Baltimore, Maryland, loves the bizarre, spectacular, and queer. Her fiction has been featured in publications such as One Story, the North American Review, Barrelhouse, and Michigan Quarterly Review. She's currently at work on a collection of short stories and a novel. And Jalynn Harris is a writer, educator, and book designer from Baltimore. They are the founder of SoftSavagePress, an indie publisher promoting the works of Black artists. Their literary work can be found in poets.org, the Best American Poetry 2022, Poetry Magazine, Gulf Coast, and elsewhere. All right, I am going to get out of the way and let you hear the poetry and prose from these incredible authors. Again, I'll be back up at the end where we'll do whatever time we have available to do Q&A.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Tony. So I'm going to read a little bit from a short story set in Baltimore, and then I'm going to yap about it for a little bit, and my feelings about the process of writing it, and then my relationship to this story now about 3 years after it was originally drafted. Okay, so this is called Love Machine. I'm going to read the first couple paragraphs. The robots have taken Seattle, and I am on the apps again. I can no longer sleep in my half-empty queen bed without another body. More than India, I miss her dog, Binky, who diagonally draped himself across the mattress every night. Whether it was a soggy July evening or one of Baltimore's cruelly dry winter nights, I could count on a furry dog blanket. Now my nighttime hands grab only limp fabric and empty air. I miss the warmth, and I miss having something living to pull towards me, which in the last several months had always been Binky. Even before she left, I could tell India was pulling away. So now I'm spending my nights during the machine uprising, swiping through the singles of the greater Chesapeake Bay area. I'm not alone in this, at least. It turns out that the oncoming annihilation of organic life makes loneliness even more lonely. You picked the right time to start messing around, Krista told me over Bloody Marys 2 weeks back. Even the straightest of straight guys are sleeping with transsexuals now. There's no room for pickiness. I could always tell that part of India blamed Krista for my transition. She was still my only close trans woman friend, and the first example I ever saw of someone proudly living a life I had ruled out as a possibility for myself. Krista had eyes only for men, but in a way she had seduced me, her unabashed sensuality and confidence broadcasting the joys of a life that I had buried. We'd first met 2 years ago at a gay bar downtown. I was still struggling through an ill-advised film degree at a time, and several of my cohort mates had decided to get trashed at the local queer watering hole. Sure, some of us were out and looking for willing bodies, but the majority of us just wanted to occupy a corner table and hope that this would be one of the rare nights that John Waters bothered to show up. Krista had slid into the empty space of the bar to my right as I waited for a blue Hawaiian. She told me that she loved a man that could order a fruity drink. It's yummy, I had replied. Why wouldn't you drink something that tastes good? She smiled and asked me to dance, and I told her that I was taken. She frowned a playful smile, and we talked for 2 more hours about the city's slowly unraveling queer scene, that I was one of the more tolerable art students that she had met, and how we both didn't understand The Sopranos. Now she's out on a date with a man named Paul she met in line for bread, and I am alone in my bedroom swiping. For a while, I kept the TV on as white noise, but so few stations are running anymore. The robots had raised most of Los Angeles during the first days of their onslaught, so now it was mostly local news or whatever nervous broadcasters operated out of any states further east than the Rockies. Mainly reruns of comfort shows and live news broadcasts of the front lines. But you could only see the footage of giant automatons tearing apart tanks and frying unlucky soldiers with heat rays so many times before it just becomes numb and not even worthy of being background soundtrack to swiping. Besides, we all knew the robots were coming. Nothing could stop them in their march eastward. Honestly, I didn't even really know what I wanted from the apps. Krista tells me that I should give men a try, but I'm nervous. Sure, I had fantasized about a firm, manly arm around my waist and scratchy kisses of Stuffle, but I had only ever dated women, and never really as a woman myself. Except for India, who informed almost everything I knew about sex and dating as an adult. I had texted India once when the robots had first begun blasting their way through Silicon Valley and gobbling up transformers and power grids. A simple, "Are you seeing this? What the fuck? This is scary." I got a one-word reply in return, and Krista took my phone for the night and had deleted India from my contacts. 6 years of dating, and I never learned her phone number by heart. Okay, so thank you. So that's Love Machine, or at least a little bit of it. I wrote this story first started drafting it in like late 2021. So I think at the time I was kind of processing the idea that like I had finally come out and had transitioned in like 2019, and it kind of felt like the world went to shit like immediately afterwards. It was like COVID happened, and then like all the 2020 election happened, and then January 6th happened, and then like the far right decided that trans people were going to be the punching bag the next couple years, and it just felt like shit. Like I had put off being myself for like my 20s, and I was finally like getting to be a person that I wanted to be, and then the world was like, everything sucks now. And so this story was kind of a way for me to sort of process that feeling of being like, feeling cheated in a way, of coming out and being like, well, I kind of was like excited to be myself, and now like everything's hard. And so my short story collection, in a lot of ways, ended up being a lot of these little apocalypse stories. I didn't even really realize that I was doing it. I just kept being like, oh, what if like everybody's possessed by demons? Or like, oh, what if like all the drugstores go out of business? Where am I going to find my hormones and that kind of stuff? And I think a lot of this was like just me sort of dealing with like the stress of it all. And I think a lot of this was also coming from me through like, honestly, it's something in retrospect, a place of privilege to some degree. I read this really wonderful essay by this writer, Vanessa Villarreal, who wrote this really wonderful essay collection called Magical Realism that came out last year. And she points out that the obsession with apocalypse and the end of the world is very much a white European and white American perspective, because the idea being that like for many colonized people throughout the entire world, they've already experienced many forms of apocalypse. And so the idea of like the world ending is very much a position that like people who are from European countries or like in America, we've experienced because our world hasn't ended in the same way that a lot of other worlds have. And I think it was like sort of humbling in a way for me to read that, and also just like talking to trans individuals from like other generations or from experiences that were not like a white trans woman like myself, and to realize that like things feel apocalyptic and they are hard and they do suck right now, but like we're not going anywhere. And there have been versions of us that have existed and survived and struggled and made it through all the last like centuries and have found ways to like find community. And I think it's been sort of helpful to sort of think have that context. And so when I revisit this story, it's something that I think about like, not only is I think the story me processing like the apocalypse and the frustrations of the idea of a world ending with like my transition, but also the idea of like, how do you find community? How do you build a new world for yourself and the aftermath of that? Because the world doesn't ever really end. It just keeps going. And there's like ways that we can continue doing that. So yeah, that's my little spiel.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to read the beginning from an essay that's coming out in an anthology called Both And, which is a series that started in Electric Lit, featuring trans and gender non-binary people of color. And this is a new essay, so it's not the essay that I had in that series, which is really just thinking about my father, who is Taiwanese. He was born in China, but raised in Taiwan, and he was in theater my entire childhood. And so I'm just sort of thinking about the ways that I wasn't pressured to perform gender in any specific way by my father, who, you know, is a straight Asian man. So it's sort of just sort of thinking more broadly about that. And I guess I'll just say, because this won't come into the excerpt that I'm reading, that Asian theater has a long history of cross-dressing roles. They don't only think about the gender you present in as the way that casting happens. From as far back as you can remember until you left home at 18, your boss starred in Mandarin stage dramas he produced with his Taiwanese friends under a nonprofit theater company, the first to produce a Mandarin-speaking play in the American South. Through this company, you watched your ba DJ for Chinese dance parties, direct a Vietnamese Elvis impersonator to offer you a plastic rose as you stood next to the stage, command the floor with your stepmother in a rousing paso doble. As teenagers, you and your twin were occasionally asked to join in, to open a night of folk dance as ghostly doubles inching across the stage behind a scrim, to sing the karaoke hit Jo Bai Jo Shi Jo Do Mei Gui, 999 Roses, at the Chinese Community Center's yearly White Elephant Party, to squeeze into cheaphouse and strut the catwalk for a fashion show, to stand or charge holding makeshift spears as soldiers in a Mandarin adaptation of King Lear, accompanied by eyeliner mustaches and foam armor painted silver and gridded black. When your brother or twin are not directly asked to participate, they can't be less interested in the endless hours of rehearsal, the plays in a language you're never encouraged to speak or understand, or even the books your ba tells you to bring to make it through the long days and nights. For you, this is not the case. Your eyes burn with want, a desire released from the fear of embodiment, being called upon by the aunties to answer in stilted, unaccented Mandarin or resort to overly perfected English, the execution more exposing of your alien American ways than considered impressive for articulation, the dreaded summoning of you and your twin to the microphone to sing Mandarin karaoke, whose words you sound out from the pinyin your father speaks while you record it in a 3-leaf binder, or that one time your ba directs you to mount the stage with your violin to test the sound after your private lesson, only to admonish your sadly mediocre playing on the car ride home. But watching is deliciously free, as long as you're discreet about it. Chinese eyes are usually so loud, but you have always known how to inhale all the details without being detected. You are young, but probably older than you imagine. You sit next to your ba as he cakes his face in grease paint. Some roles call for shoe polish just above the cheekbones and below his uniquely heavy-set eyes, a result of the Mongolian ancestry you share. His eyes have already been roughly outlined in thick black pencil. His hair is tied in a bun at the top of his head, wrapped with a square of brown fabric to match the changshan he wears. While he sits in front of a small cosmetic mirror in a dressing room, he bellows in a tongue you know as intimately as your skin, but which is shrouded in mystery, not unlike your ba himself. The voice of an auntie, one of the many who remains nameless to you, ricochets back, and soon a boy your age, who plays your ba's son, delivers a tube of red lipstick. It is your favorite part, watching his lips come to life like fireworks. The first time you're scolded as a child for a physical act unbecoming of a girl is at the clubhouse, the Montessori after school and weekend daycare where you learn to play basketball, draw, write, sew, compete in tiered level tournaments in Montezuma's Revenge on Atari, and swim at the rec center pool. It's not that you want to be a boy, but it's already becoming clear to you that girls are shaped in ways that aggravate the dissonance between you. A distance already carved by your not quite whiteness, your fractured divorced home, your wild and brazen white mother, your Taiwanese NASA engineer by day, actor by night father. You're not quite like the boys either, but they don't mind your company as long as you're not precious or overly sensitive. Your ba never handles you with satin gloves, that's for sure. You are tender-hearted, as your ba loves reminding you when his harsh tongue immediately brings you to tears, but that soft age is saved just for him. On one Saturday morning at the clubhouse, you sit on the carpet with 3 boys so ultimately insignificant you can't even summon a guess at their names. Their looks so generic white 1980s you couldn't pick them out of a group photograph. The 4 of you while away the time comparing moles. One rolls up the sleeve of his t-shirt. Another raises the bottom of his shorts to reveal a fuzzy dark oval on his thigh. You pull down your shorts and underwear just an inch to expose the brown dot, just a hair larger than a freckle, barely below your belly. It is just you and the boys, and the interaction between the 2 of you is innocent, sexless. Suddenly, from high above you, the shrill voice of a teacher, whose name and face have also blurred in memory beyond recognition. "Addie!" she screams. As you hurriedly raise your waistband back up to your belly, the boys nudging you in the elbow and chuckling. Shame, a word you don't yet hold, bleeds through. Perhaps this is why those boys lose their importance, their faces and names fading from view. The teacher you grow to understand is a thief of your genderless innocence, your body years from ripening. You'll never feel safe with those boys again. You will lose yourself in drawing comics and writing little stories for the clubhouse rally, the stapled magazine made of Xeroxed pages and cutouts and glue stick. That teacher will say nothing when one of the young men who supervises you and the other children holds you by your ankles upside down under the basketball hoop and calls you by your middle name, which you randomly despise, over and over again, while another tickles you as you squirm and shout for them to stop. This too is about gender. This too is a thievery, but it is also a lesson you learn you are privileged to only be taught once or twice. In your 20s, you ride shotgun as your best friend drives to a juke joint. He is a black gay man from the South. A Sam Cooke song you love croons through the speakers. When Sam whistles, so do you. Your bestie practically falls out of his seat. He tells you his mama always told his sister it wasn't polite for girls to whistle. You laugh at the idea of whistling a song being ascribed such a value as politeness. You cringe at the idea only boys and men would be allowed such a joyous pastime. You stop. He assures you you can continue to enjoy the song, but the moment has passed. You won't remember all of the lessons like this one, your first one, that of the whistling. But adulthood will shower you with so many accidental thefts from so many sources that teach you what it means to be she. They will feel like being nicked by a knife or a BB pellet. Each time you are taught a lesson about the rules of gender, you will think back to your ba's red mouth, his small bun. You will see his thick floral apron stretched tightly over his round belly as he fills mini pie crusts with cheesecake for your orchestra bake sales. You will revisit the time he taught your sister to dance, helped you perfect your runway walk for the Cheap Pal fashion show. A montage of all your father's roles flutter behind the eyes. Through them, you have always known the gendered body, an ever-evolving performance, is never static. You have known this outside of theory or even language, that it is through the play of gendered embodiment true euphoria lives. Not once will you recall him telling you the rules and restrictions of girlhood. Not once will you recall witnessing him tell your brother how one must behave or abstain from behaving to be a man. In your 40s, he will tell you over Xiaolong Bao about one of his earliest roles on stage in Taiwan, a waitress, after you ask him when acting became a vocation for him. No one, including your stepmother, will bat an eye at this anecdote. You understand that this is a luxury. It will take some time for you to learn that this lack makes you one of the lucky ones. In many other ways, you were not dealt the easiest hand as far as childhood is concerned. But you will learn, just as you do with your own expansive, ever-shifting relationship to gender, to take the totality of your childhood by the yard like a shimmering fabric, wrap it across your face as you angle your chin up towards the sky. Only then will you find the perforations in between, what your ba, even among all his imperfections, makes possible. Thanks.
Hello. That was really lovely. Thank you so much to the two of you, Casey and Addie. Excited to hear you read too. So I'm really happy you read a piece about your dad, Addie, because I had a very different experience where my dad was really concerned with my gender expression. And I guess I'll start there in my poetry reading. I'm working on a collection right now. And there's a series in the collection called Hair, all the same title, different poems. And as all of us know, hair is deeply tied to gendered expression, how people read you. So, hair. When I was in that haunted house, I wore some kind of head. It smelled of addicts sweating in each other's hot summer arms. It was big, like a lion's helmet, and the face was just as inhuman. If I tilted my head back as if avoiding a nosebleed, I could see those coin-sized sockets, the only entering light. Because I was 12, I had no word for monster other than monster, and secretly into the cup of my palms, Daddy. His hand I shuddered while holding as we crossed the street's traffic. Was I nothing like him? We both loved to scare, and I did have a tendency to rattle like a grenade and throw myself into the middle of the square. This is the truth. He never hit me, except with the columns of his screams and his rules. Clean your face, daughter, as if the drips of hair on my chin were leaves collecting the city's dirt. Letting him lead me to the kettle as it sang with wax, I wore its scorching head and ate the shriek silently. So when I was around 12, I wasn't diagnosed with PCOS until much later in life, but around the point is the same time I started to bleed and My body was changing. I also was growing a beard. So I had a very genderqueer young childhood, which, I mean, I'm an adult and I still am very gender fluid, but both of my early, like my body, what it said to me was that I was without binary, but my dad was very concerned with like, oh, my daughter has a beard. So he made me go get waxed all the time, which was really traumatizing for me, to the point that I didn't ever take it into my own hands until I was much older. And my brother, one of my oldest brothers, he was like, I'll just teach you how to shave, and which just helped me have more agency over my body. And so this is a poem about that moment for me. Hair. Knowing I had lied, he invited me to the mirror. In his left hand, he held the blade. Looking into the green rimmed glass, I asked, where do we begin? The plastic overhead light leering between thighs of stucco and toothpaste salt, soft commas of lint, the cactus-pinched edges of my chin. Wash, he said, turning the spigot red and rubbing off the quiet rays of the day's dirt. I followed, hosing my own decay. Choose a direction, then slowly, one section at a time. My brother, who I had been mistaken for as a child, teaching me how to look at myself. Through fists of green clouds, the seams of hair fell, meaningful threads into the sink. Here's another hair poem. This one is much older. I was in college, and I'd always had this like creation myth that and I didn't realize until this moment that I'd had this creation myth about myself, but I was like convinced that my mom told me I was supposed to be born a boy, and then the last minute just came out as AFAB, which is really silly. But I told the doctor this when I was like 19 in college, and she's like, that's not how it works. And I was like, girl, what? My mom told me that. But so hair. It was for sanitation, the dry paper, separating my thighs from the cold faux leather. I was supposed to be born, I began, nervous to share how I had arrived. The doctor's keyboard knocked, not yellow, not white, walls lit by long throats of light. No longer the silence of corridors or waiting. I had never told anyone before, sweating into the table's stage curtain. What are you here for? Her question, ringing as thick chores of hair conspired as if in conference. Key-wide sideburns, noodling rung shoots from ear to ear, no longer just on the right side. A boy, and then, last minute, I changed, right? She looked up for the first time, furrowed, two sides of a bridge drawn up. That's not how that works. Then muted. Blood tests, testosterone, polycystic ovarian. In the lab, my veins as easy to find as my hair, needle pinched, pulling out into the open, what was always inside. Okay, I'll read one last poem. Hair. How can a piece of my body falling quietly look like ash, or a car spun out on a highway, or like those bugs I played with as a child? My touch enough to coil the tiny black creature in on itself. Back then, I was always playing in the dirt, and Ma let me. To her, I'd bring bouquets of rocks and shoeboxes and mud pies stuffed with acorn fruit. Sometimes she'd even say a prayer over those dandelion graveyards, and we'd refill the whole together. But when I asked her why I couldn't look like Jakira, why she wouldn't let my hair burn straight as the letter I, she swore to me that the good hair burn was a warning, like most fires, lifting her wig like a lid from the kettle to show her button-smooth scalp. Lin, she'd say, these are not wires confused around themselves. No, each strand is a page in a story. Each afro is a library of books. Thanks.
Jalynn, that was awesome. It has been wonderful reading with all three of you, Nic and Addie. I'm really glad we're all doing this together. Hello, can everyone hear me? I might do it this way. Okay, wonderful. I spend enough time like hunched over in front of like stuff, so that's. So I'm going to read a story from a first bit of a short story called Portal, which is in an upcoming issue of the Hopkins Review. I don't think it's out there yet, but the next one that comes. It's the beginning, so I'm not going to give you any preamble. Everyone can still hear me okay? This is all still happening? What a great situation. Okay. When I first met Missy and began going over to the girls' house, before Nic and I started dating, and before I moved him in with the girls, so I went over with one night, and it was just Missy and me. And Missy and I, we got to talking about relationships. And she told me about the first online date that she ever had after the most devastating breakup of her life. It was this girl in Detroit. They had met online, and Missy had crossed over the bridge one Tuesday night to go to her place for dinner, right? And the girl was a lawyer, and she fought health insurance companies. She said, and the girl asked her to bring over ginger beer. The girl apologized when Ben Folds came on Spotify. And Missy laughed, and she was like, oh no, I still listen to him too, but if you tell anyone, I will deny it. And they had a nice dinner. This girl, she clinked a glass of sparkling cider with her. They watched a movie. They watched Garden State, of all things. The girl was like, you ready to get sad? Missy had such a good time that night, and she liked this girl, who halfway through the movie excused herself and came back dressed in old school pajamas, loose and navy blue cotton with white trim and white buttons. And when Missy left, the girl said, let's hug? And then she drove back over the bridge in a sea of 18-wheeler brake lights, and the girl texted days later and said, I'm sorry, but I didn't feel anything. I did not ask Missy how she felt about this. I feel bad that I didn't ask, but I just didn't. Instead, what I did was I told her about the liminal months after that boy in Edmonton revealed he was cheating on me, the boy who was the most devastating breakup of my life, and my life's main love, still, though it has been a decade since I met him, and I am now with another man. In that immediate post-heart-shattering period, the boy in Edmonton thought we could still make our relationship work, and strangely, so did I. It wasn't even like a we can still be friends thing. Like, he thought that we could still be together even though he was in love with someone else and he hated the idea of polyamory. Don't ask me how it worked. But I still lived with him for months, even though the girl he cheated on me with, well, she would stay over in our goddamn house. And yet, most of my days still looked so placid during that time. I went to work. I got dinner. I came home. It's amazing what you can justify to yourself when the rest of your life looks normal. One morning, I dropped him off at the sleep clinic. He was on nights at the station back then. And I still had a couple hours before work, and I drove down the road listening to Polly Came Home, and microscopic dots of snow were coming down. There was ice on the road, but no snow, and I didn't have winter tires, and I drove slowly, very carefully, and the neighborhood was completely still. The street was shuttered and closed. The remnant of the sunrise was a faint purple line, and the clouds were light, and the whole world was eggshell and sparkling gray. I drove up to the diner at the far end of the street. It turned out it wasn't open yet, but I wasn't bothered. I sat in my car idling, staring out into the trundle of rush hour, coming the other way before wheeling around to get a Tim's. And in that very moment, there was a woman sleeping in my apartment that I hated, who I despised even, and I was aware of this, but I didn't feel it. No, I felt light and secretive and soft. I thought things like, I love him, and we're going to make it. Even now, I can feel how peaceful I felt that morning in the midst of betrayal and rage. There were so many evenings in those liminal months when I would be home trying to sleep, and he would have a night off, and I would hear them laughing, and I would feel like I was dying. I would be listening to a podcast in bed, and she would come in and say, she was so sorry, but could I possibly turn down my speakers a little bit? That happened one night. He did nothing. I had a fantasy in that moment of getting up and throwing my phone right at her head and saying, get the fuck out of my house. For all I know, it had been that very night before that morning that I dropped him off at the sleep clinic, then drove back across the city peacefully in the late, icy dawn light. Maybe not. But the woman who ruined my life was sleeping in my apartment at that moment. That I know for sure. Sorry. It's not fair to say that she ruined my life, I know. But some things you can't shake, and some things aren't fair. A certain point, it just is what it is. Okay, so Missy and I, we were telling each other these stories, right? These stories of ours. The first night, basically, that she and I really talked, actually talked, just us, before Nick and I started dating and before I moved Nick into that house. And with a sad seriousness that was utterly genuine. Missy said to me, she looked at me and she said, "We're not going to have kids or families, okay? You know? This is what we have. That's why the girls have to be there for each other." And I get that. Fair enough. Yet, despite however much she might have been accurately describing both of our lives, despite how accurate it was, still I could only think, hey, bitch, speak for yourself. Okay, so the story goes on after that, and I think the only thing I really want to say about it is that I was reading this the other day, this excerpt, and I realized at no point in this part does it specify that everyone in all these characters are trans. Well, most of them actually. 3 of them in here are trans, and Missy and the narrator are. And I was like, huh, neat. And I didn't even realize it until after it was published. There's another thing in my book on community, a nonfiction book, where the first part of that book involves a story from when I was 20 and before I transitioned. And there's a really key pivotal scene where somebody, I want to recount when someone's talking about me and of course refers to me with male pronouns. And I was like, but it felt really awkward also to shoehorn it felt important to the scene to just kind of say that and not be which is inaccurate, by the way, because I am a trans woman and because my pronouns are she, her. I don't know. And I just thought, I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to let the essay be there and I will introduce this book this way. And everyone else I bet is going to keep up and figure it out. I don't feel like I need to sort of throat clear or be by the way, just so you all understand. And I felt a large freedom in being able to do that. I guess the same kind of freedom that led me to not even mention that these characters are trans in this story, which I didn't even realize until after I published. It's a freedom that I cherished, and if there are any trans writers in this audience, which I think there are, that is a freedom that I want for all of you. That's all.
Thank you all for that. There are, I believe, mics into your chairs or near them if you want to use those for Q&A. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for coming out. This year's, there's 2 of them, sorry, yeah, there's 2. This year's festival, everything got moving so late, and so all of you doing this on short notice and having this being sort of the way we close of the day, it means so much to me, so thank you all for being out. And thank you for coming out, and if you've been here all day, for hanging out. It's lovely to see so many people I know, and also so many new faces in the audience, and I only see one maybe of my fellow board members here, but thank you to my fellow board members and staff of City Lit. Yeah, did you know that, so City Lit's 2 staff and then a working board and a bunch of volunteers to make this happen every year, and so I can't believe we did it again. That's crazy. Okay, great. We have some time for Q&A that I wanted to start. And Nick, I think you set us up great because I'm obsessed with Apocalypse, and I'm also obsessed with how Apocalypse is racialized. I think so many of us felt in 2020 oh, fuck, it's the end of the world. And then it did end, and then we kept going, and then in the last couple of months, oh, fuck, it's the end of the world. And so I just wanted to ask what you all thought about writing and publishing right now, and spending time writing stories and poems and sharing poems and stories and essays when we're also oh, fuck, well, I have healthcare next year and taking care of our community members, and just what you think that interaction is between your writing and your publishing and the disaster we're living in right now.
I guess I'll go first. So, obviously, I have a lot of wonderful things in my life, but writing is one of the few things that gives me purpose to some degree. I don't know. I go crazy if there's not some kind of project I'm working towards, or some kind of thing that I have that's not related to work or my family or my social life. I need some other thing to be pulling towards, and if I didn't have that, then I think I would be collapsing. And also the other thing that gives me life purpose is reading other things written by trans people. So it's I'm glad that exists. Yeah, so I feel that's sort of my lifeline, both as a reader and as a writer. And I think there are times where I kind of worry about like people reading my writing, especially because like some of the writing I've been doing is a little bit like out there, and like I don't know, like will people read it and have like a negative reaction, or have like will draw negative attention towards me and people I care about and stuff like that. And I feel like there is a hyper scrutiny on trans people, but at the same time I want to write the art that I want to write. And I was talking to my fiance about this other day, and she was expressing the worry, and I was like, babe, like in order for like the bad people that I don't want to read this work to read it, they would have to read in the first place. Or they have to read trans people in the first place, which I just don't think they're doing. But I do know that trans people read trans people and other people I want to read my work. And I think that's sort of like what's been giving me like a little bit of a life raft in all this.
So I guess I'm the editor-in-chief of Just Femme and Dandy, which is a queer fashion magazine, and we're about to launch what I'm calling a mixtape, which is our alternative to the sort of traditionally published lit magazines. So instead of like, you know, a printed text that's bound, we're doing separates that will be packaged inside a vinyl dust jacket. And so we're both, and we've always paid our contributors. We've always been a paying market. We completely subsist on grants. If there came a time that we couldn't pay people, I just wouldn't continue to do this work. It just feels really important to me. So we're going to, you know, we're paying the contributors for being in the mixtape as well as when we sell them at like Zine Fest. And this was my way of thinking outside of the very unsustainable practice of being a print lit mag. So we'll see how it goes. We're planning to launch at World Pride in DC in June. But I would say that, so that's like one piece, is that at least I can figure out ways to curate and to pay our writers and artists and to bring people out in that way. One of the things that's been sort of frustrating me is that a lot of people are saying things like, oh, you know, writing changes the world, and don't feel bad about your writing because writing saves. And I just feel like we should fucking write because we write, because that's what we do in our lives. Like this like idea that I'm only allowed to do the things that are going to like change this, I don't even know the word for it, that I did not cause, that I did not contribute to. I just feel like I'm gonna write because writing provides me a lot of meaning. I mean, I do write work that I think is important, but I also just, that compulsion, I just want to push away or push back on that idea that everything we do has to be in service of this systemic issue. Because obviously the crisis we're in, we're not in that crisis for one person. We're in that crisis for a whole lot of factors. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is that publishing feels very precarious, but also that it will always be here in some form. I think we will always figure out ways to get our work out there and to distribute it. And whether we do that by divesting in these corporations and institutions, whether we do that by intervening in those spaces, whether we do that by going back to DIY. I just think that we'll always be here, you know? It does feel like dire and scary in a way it hasn't in a long time, but I just have confidence and faith that our energy and our talent and our discernment and our skill is still going to get us out there.
Personally, I really do struggle with what am I doing? The point of, I mean, obviously I know the point of writing is its purpose for me. And, but I'm like, oh, shouldn't I be doing something else more concrete? Is kind of the word, I think. But at the same time, I think it's maybe, I mean, I feel like I'm like singing into the capitalist mindset. And also I'm a public school teacher, so there's like this huge rhetoric in the career path I am in that we do everything for the kids, risk your body and your mind and your time. So I think those two things I really struggle with getting through so I can get to the surface of like my purpose is to write. I know that, and I know that we write because we write, but I am not necessarily in a profession that is encouraging me towards that type of creative freedom. So I struggle with it.
Oh. Two mics, that could be fun. As far as the question of like, something that has been, I think, so I'm both a writer and a publisher, and something that makes me feel really, really, the part of my writing life that I feel extremely, extremely fortunate to have that publishing experience is that it is so just like carved into my brain in granite how different it is to write something than it is to publish something. They are just like completely separate, compartmentalized processes for me, which is also an advice that I would give writers who have a book out. Be like those are. Anyway, I mean, I know that's not the case for everybody, but it has been really helpful for me. And so for me, with writing, it's like, well, I mean, just because I'm writing a thing doesn't mean like it is going to get published. Doesn't mean that I will want to publish it in a specific place at a specific time. Maybe it'll mean that I will want to hold on for it. Maybe it'll mean that I will be forced to hold on to it for a while. I don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities. For me, I'm fortunate enough, it's like fairly academic. I can probably get my next book published when I wanted to, but also maybe not. I mean, the future, as we know, is extremely unknown and scary. And so that's just, I think, like writing and publishing are separate things. And then as far as there's something, then the second part of your question, I think there's something about specifics that always really, really helps me. I struggle a lot too, thinking like, oh, I need to be doing more. I shouldn't be writing. I should be devoting more time to like other bigger things. But honestly, like, is the choice usually really that stark? It's often maybe not completely. Like, I'm also like, I teach at a university, and like, yeah, I don't want to neglect my students because I'm writing, but can I neglect some boring administrative bullshit that can wait for next week? Oh, yes, I can. That's probably fine. And, you know, again, when like the things being stark, I mean, like, if I'm, let's say, like, okay, this is my hour for writing time, I'm going to do this, it's going to happen. Like, if I get a call halfway through that's like, hey, like, someone's kind of in crisis and needs a place to crash tonight, I'll be like, hold on, it's my writing time. You're going to have to call back in an hour, buddy. No, that's not going to happen. But it usually doesn't end up that way. It's usually not that stark. So if I think like day by day, hour by hour, and I think about specifics, what are the things I'm actually trying to like think of and figure around? There's a lot more easy answers to turn to. Like, I'm pretty lucky and privileged in my current life. The thing that I'm sort of most on guard on is that I teach in a red state public university where they keep passing like monster bills attacking higher education, and I don't think it's touching me yet, but it might. And so I have been thinking of things like, okay, let's say all of a sudden I don't have my job. What does that look like? What would I do? How would I carry on with my professional life? I really don't want to. It would be pretty bad for me if that happened. But I mean, like, it's easier for me to say, like, okay, if that happened, if X happened, how would Y or Z happen? Then I can actually probably plan for that. I can come up with some answers for that. And that's better than the kind of like, I don't know, thinking that like the scary Eye of Sauron blob is just like waiting to zap me or something, you know? So thinking about like really specifics, like what does this stuff actually mean to me personally in my life and day to day, and what can I actually do? Not like theoretically or not like possibilities, what's actually happening and what can I actually do and how can I actually respond? That like helps me kind of like unfuck some stuff with this brain. Sorry for cursing.
Yeah, I started it. It's okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think we're all educators of some sort, and the things that admin will try to get away with under the guise of students first. Yeah, like, yeah. So hey, I had more questions, but we're also running short. We started late, so we'll go a little late. But are there any like burning, you have to get this question out things from the audience that you wanted to ask our writers? All right, cool. We'll wrap up. We're going to do a little signing. And then if you haven't seen the schedule, there is a reception down in the lobby bar as well. I have some formal closing remarks. I want to thank you all so much for joining us for our session today. We hope you've enjoyed it. Given all of the news of funding threats to the arts, particularly literary arts, if you're interested in supporting events like this, please consider donating to help fund City Lit. We do not know what tomorrow will bring, but we do know that we want to continue expanding our reach and our offering sessions like this one. There are out in the lobby some print feedback things, and on it has a QR code if you want to donate directly to us. It's really important that we receive your feedback so we can also keep strengthening our programming here. Downstairs, the Ivy Bookshop, apparently I'm told their desk is still open. They've stayed open for us, and so they will be selling the books that our authors have. Casey and Addie will be briefly stopping by author desk for any signings, and then we will all be down in the reception area down in the lobby bar. Thank you all so much for joining us.